Now, a French man held in Iran since October 2022 has revealed his identity. That's 34-year-old Olivier Grondeau, who had previously only been identified by his first name. But speaking via a message broadcast on a French radio station, he said he and his two fellow French detainees held in Iran were, quote, exhausted. Like the other hostages, Grondeau's accused of seeking to stir up labor protests. His family, though, says he's a passionate fan of Persian poetry who was traveling to Iran on a tourist visa as part of a world tour. Well, that comes as Iran is set to hold nuclear talks with France, Britain, and Germany this Monday, 1 week before U.S. President-elect Donald Trump takes office. They're the second round of talks over Iran's nuclear program in less than 2 months after a discreet meeting in Geneva in November between Tehran and the three European powers who are known as the E3. Iran's foreign minister says the main objective is to remove the sanctions on Iran. We're going to talk more about all of this with Sanam Vakil, who joins me now from London. Sanam, let's start first with the developments we saw over the weekend with Iran saying its citizen, Mohammed Abedini, who was being held in Italy, was now back home. This, of course, coming just days after Iranian authorities released an Italian journalist, Cecilia Sala, from a jail in Tehran. Now, Iran has denied any links between her case and the other case. I mean, what do you think? What do you read into this kind of hostage diplomacy?
Well, I certainly wouldn't call it diplomacy. This is Iran long running and using the detention of dual nationals and foreign nationals to pressure the international community and particularly European countries. This is a practice that has gone on for far too long. And it's urgent and really critical that countries impacted not only warn their citizens, which they do on their websites very clearly, but come together and stand in front of I think, television cameras and the international community and make it clear that Iran's continued detentions will have consequences. France, the Italians, the UK, Germany, all these countries that have experienced detentions of their citizens try to deal bilaterally with Iran, oftentimes discreetly, and certainly Cecilia Sala's release is linked to the release and the return of Mr. Abedini to Tehran.
You mentioned France, and there are, as I was saying before, 3 French people who are still being held in Iran, one of whom just recently revealed his identity. I mean, do you see their release coming anytime soon?
Well, I'm not privy to the bilateral discussions that are taking place between the French and the Iranians. Certainly, there is some discussion taking place. I know President Macron's very strong words towards Iran over its nuclear program should be connected to this hostage taking as well. Iran is under pressure from the international community. Its nuclear program is certainly accelerating. You did mention that there are talks taking place today, perhaps to coordinate a broader negotiation with Iran. And as part of that negotiation, it's high time that European leaders make clear, also with punitive measures, that this continuing hostage taking is not clearly productive, but will come with Europe's own strategy to push back and to prevent individuals from getting caught up in these sort of broader dynamics.
Let's talk a bit more about these nuclear talks, the third sequence of these meetings happening today. Now, the E3, the UK, France, and Germany is getting increasingly frustrated with Iran. You were mentioning President Macron, his harsh comments saying the acceleration of Iran's nuclear program is, quote, bringing us close to the breaking point. Iran, of course, slamming those comments, calling them baseless. What can we expect from today, given those tensions going into these talks?
Well, I think tensions have been mounting for quite some time. It's important to give some context. Iran's nuclear program is certainly advancing and is unchecked since the U.S. has withdrawn from the Iran nuclear agreement and since there has been no real successful restoration of the Iran nuclear agreement. Iran is seeking broader negotiations with the West. And of course, we're waiting for the Trump administration to come into office and better understand what their Iran strategy will be. They've made it clear that harder sanctions and sanctions enforcement are coming back. But tied to that, I think Europe has a role to play. They were certainly very instrumental in the last rounds of negotiations, and European interests can't be neglected and pushed to the side. Europe is very frustrated also by Iran's continued support for Russia in the war in Ukraine. So these talks that are taking place today, I think, are about developing maybe a roadmap, aligning on objectives while preparing for the incoming Trump administration. It's urgent that negotiations begin and start taking place consistently over the next coming months to prevent a breakout of Iran's nuclear program or a broader crisis from taking place.
You just mentioned there a moment ago, Donald Trump, of course, coming into office in a week's time. During his first term, he, everyone will remember, pulled the U.S. out of the landmark nuclear deal with Iran. How will things change for these nuclear talks once Donald Trump steps back into power next week?
Well, the Trump administration certainly is taking a harder line approach towards Iran. They have made it clear that sanctions enforcement and harsher sanctions will be imposed on the Islamic Republic. Parts of the new administration have also said that they're not seeking to impose regime change in Iran, which is important, but rather perhaps to reinstigate a broader set of negotiations with the Islamic Republic at a time where Iran is certainly back-footed in the region after Israel's efforts at degrading Iran-backed groups. What we don't know, of course, is what the Trump administration's timelines are and how important Iran will be to their broader regional approach. So we're in a bit of a waiting game. And I think for Iran itself, how quickly they can get to the negotiating table will be important for its own economic resilience and for the President Pezeshkian's commitments to try and achieve some sanctions relief for his own legitimacy internally, but ultimately for Iran, for the Iranian economy and Iranian people.
Sanam, thank you for that. Sanam Vakil speaking to me there from London. And as Sanam was speaking, we just heard that Russia and Iran are going to sign a comprehensive strategic partnership treaty on Friday, January 17th. We'll be covering that for you as the roll-up to that date comes here on France 24.